So, we're talking about extraterrestrials today, all right? And what better way to start is with the secrecy of the government, because if we weren't already leery of the government already, just wait, because it's going to get even worse. I mean, at this point, I'm like, I don't know what to believe anymore. You would have asked me 5 years ago if aliens existed, I would have been like, microbes on Mars. Now I'm like, oh, maybe they've got something with these little green people. Like, I don't know. So I did a little bit of digging. If you guys want to, see any additional information, or you don't want to hear my potential speech impediment come out while saying this, Netflix, Hangar 1, episode 1, it has to do with presidents. So where I'm going to start it time wise, because I have like a little timeline, and even kind of when I tried to see if there was a connection between the presidents that were like how they reacted based on their political party, because maybe one party was a little bit more open with information than others, but it kind of looks not really like there's a correlation between that. But they originally thought that Eisenhower was the first president to have contact with aliens, but that's actually not true. It was Harry Truman from his presidency in 1945 to 1953. He was actually sworn to secrecy in a sense because of the whole Roswell incident, and everybody around the world knew about that, where they tried covering it up and saying it was a weather balloon, it wasn't anything extraterrestrial or anything like that. And he was the first one to have to make an actual public statement on it. And then it wasn't until Eisenhower where they had a really, and this is how they opened up the show too. They opened it up with Eisenhower basically going missing for 12 hours. Nobody knew where he was at. There were people who were printing up tabloids stating that he died. And then, he was found 12 hours later at a church, and he was saying, "Oh, I just had emergency surgery on a chipped tooth." That doesn't take you 12 hours. And they actually found out that he was at a hangar where he supposedly was meeting with aliens. Now, they have a lot of people that are at this hangar that are witnesses, but of course, everybody was sworn to secrecy. They couldn't say anything that went on. So there was like very, very minimal details about that. All they know is that there was a potential physical meeting. And then ironically, the next president on was John F. Kennedy, from 1961 to 1963, where he actually gave them a shoot them down order if he sent, fighter jets into the sky and said, "You see anything that's like fits this description, shoot them down," which was kind of scary during that time, because this was the time that there was the big Red Scare, with the Soviet Union. And he actually partnered up with the Soviet Union, and they were having conversations back and forth because they were scared that when these extraterrestrials would show up on radar, that each country would mistake it for enemy missiles. So they were afraid of basically a nuclear war breaking out. So they kind of tried to have conversations with each other in order to prevent any kind of misunderstanding. And then ironically, 10 days later, approximately, was when Kennedy was shot. I don't know if it was a connection with just him talking to the Soviet Unions about aliens, or if it was because they were worried of treason, or who. There's plenty of versions of that story. So moving on. Then you go into Johnson, 1963 to 1969. So in 1967 at Maelstrom Air Force Base, there was the glowing red object that was in the sky. And during that time period, it was on March 16th at the site. their whole missile system would go offline. And this was actually a reoccurring thing every time they had this, because this is still, we're still trying to prevent war with the Soviets, and they're having the same issues. Everybody's stuff is going offline, and that's kind of scary. There's some kind of, disturbance with electricity or something. And then that's when you get the interesting conversation or event with Nixon in his presidency of 1969 to 1974, with 1974 being when there was a time period where him and his right hand man, it wasn't his vice president, it was someone else. I don't know the name exactly. But they were taken to a remote location where the guy that was with him literally had a mental breakdown, couldn't eat or sleep for like 3 weeks after what they described was children-sized bodies in a freezer. Now, that I mean, that he had to have seen something pretty traumatic in order to have that kind of response. And basically, every response that was carried out by every president with any kind of connections with the extraterrestrials or UFO sightings, they kind of went into a depression. Nixon and his co-partner there weren't the only ones that suffered that. Then it kind of skipped a presidency. Ford, nothing really significant happened, or at least that was labeled in the show. Jimmy Carter's where it kind of got interesting. He received a briefing, and then there's actually photographs of him at his desk where he was pretty much like depressed, like he cried at his desk after this briefing of UFO sightings, where he personally admitted that he publicly saw like UFO sightings. But when he tried to get people to kind of back him up on it, this is when the CIA kind of came in, and they're like, yeah, we can't give you any kind of information. We can't back you up. We're sworn to secrecy, and we need you to stay secret too. And then Reagan was another president from 1981 to 1989 that personally encountered a UFO. It was another sighting. He was in a plane with two other people, and they actually have uh, voice recording of how it happened. It was like an object in the sky that was traveling in a zigzag pattern. Where it gets really, really interesting is when you go to George Bush, or George Bush Sr., who was a director of the CIA, and him and his family all had like really in-depth connections with the CIA. And he was one of the most secretive about this. Like, he didn't give any kind of information, which was disappointing to the public, because they were like, oh, we have the gatekeeper of this information. Like, he's going to tell us. And of course, he didn't. Then you go into Bill Clinton's presidency, and the way that they made him seem in the videos, he was way, way too eager to get this information and to tell it to the public. So they didn't really tell him much. And I think that's why going into Bush Jr., you had more secrecy because of, the CIA family thing, secrecy and all that. And even when Obama became president, he was actually extremely dismissive about it. He had a website in which people, could ask questions and the White House would answer. And there was somebody that, of course, that came up with the topic of extraterrestrials and UFO sightings. And they flat out said that there was no evidence of any kind that there were any kind of UFO sightings or extraterrestrials on Earth, which, I mean, with everything that we know and see and we'll discuss in this meeting today, I find that kind of hard to believe.
So here you go. The government is aware of and is covering up the existence of aliens. Why?
I think that part of that kind of goes to the responses of the presidents. Now, a lot of these presidents are heavily religious men, and I could be completely wrong too. I mean, I can't remember if I had the discussion here or somewhere else, but what would it mean for a religious person to find out that there was concrete evidence of aliens? What would that mean for your your faith.
Well, some people think that's why the Pope is in Iran, because they're getting ready for it. I mean, the Vatican has access to probably just as much as our CIA.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys saw that, right? He's talking to, yeah, that's a big deal.
The most I know about the Pope is the movie Angels and Demons and Da Vinci Code.
Well, wasn't Clinton president when the Disclosure Project happened? Isn't that why he's so anxious about to know? Because Dr. Greer actually briefed his people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that went into the next presidency. And then that was basically like
Wiped
nothing
out.
happened.
Yep. So if you go into your last week's whole demon thing, people think aliens are demons. Some people strongly think that aliens are demons. And that's why they're afraid if we admit that they're real, that will destroy the church, because everybody's a Satan worshiper if you hang out with an alien. That's true. They really do.
But then what about the people that think that aliens are angels? Well, and then you have the comparisons with like aliens and fairies, since that their behavior is very similar. They abduct people. They tell you not to eat or drink stuff. People say they saw a bright white light and a bunch of people going, while they're getting things looked at and operated on in both senses. And then even I had written down in my notes that there are a lot of people that apparently think that the cryptids that we see are actually alien life forms.
Well, that is possible.
It would explain why there's so few that we haven't seen them.
Or that they're transplanted here. I think about, there was like a kids movie that came out recently about an alien that literally just goes around to all the different planets and collects the last of every species. What if that's what they're doing? They're just collecting the last of every species on other planets and then just dropping them off here, and they're like, here, good luck, there you go, figure it out.
Cool.
Have 1,000
I'm in.
of a squad. Right, yeah, I'm here for it.
I like it. Oh my God.
Like C's question of why now? Like, why would they just now be like, hey guys, all that stuff that we've been denying for the past 70 odd years or more? Yeah, so we kind of lied about it.
I think it has to be in the best interest of those who can make the most money out of it for us to actually find out. There has to be some kind of financial gain involved, whereas they think we're capable of comprehending it, first of all, without freaking out, or somebody's going to make a shit ton of money out of us finding out.
Probably. It's always going to be about the money and the power.
So if we all entertain those things and we don't go, oh my God, it's an alien, shoot it, then maybe we're at the point where we're ready for this stuff. And also, they may not have a choice, because it seems to me a lot of this stuff is being forced by people who are ready to expose it. So either they're going to tell it or it's going to come out, because there's too many things being shown and leaked. Just that thing from the Pentagon being released is unfathomable.
And it is kind of ironic that over time we have been seeing more and more occurrences, especially within the last couple of years, of alien sightings. Maybe they're just waiting for a time where we're not so violent of a population, or as far as our government goes. But
have you ever seen, there's a lot of guys from Vietnam who talk about UFOs coming out of the rivers and stopping them from fighting or defending a certain city or area. And they don't talk about it, but a lot of them, when they were dying, wrote deathbed confessions about how aliens when they thought they were aliens. I want to know if any of you think that they might actually be earlier humans who maybe went underground. If you think about ice ages and the things that they found in Turkey, it literally could be versions of us that have become so intelligent because they're not exposed to everything that we are. What if they're like literally the inner earth people that people talk about? Not inner earth like the earth is hollow, because that's the joke. But there are pockets underneath the ground. They could see it now with LiDAR. Some people believe that it actually is like a type of human that, there's how many species they've found now? 7. That they could be an earlier species of us. And the reason why you don't see a lot of them and they're only in certain areas is because that's where there's these huge cave systems. Maybe they're looking to take us underground because we're going into another comet. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it without it sounding crazy. Like they talk about like how people don't think there's just UFOs, but you also all know that there's USOs under the oceans, right? That's what that Tic Tac thing was. Well, they've been seeing that forever. Like Foo Fighters weren't just up in the air. There were things under the water during World War II as well, and World War I. And if you even, who is it? Columbus even had in his journals that they saw a USO. And then a light came up underwater by the ship and came out of the water and flew up in the air. So these aren't like new things. So maybe they're just the reason why we don't know so much about the ocean is because we do know a lot about the ocean and maybe we're not allowed to go there. So they literally could be in bases under the water as well. And Mr. Steve, if you're into the Indian Hindu, a lot of what they say is basically that, like they're here, but they're not here. It's almost like they're in portals. They're in the sky, but they're in the, I don't know. It's
I mean,
similar, but
if
not
you want
100%.
to look at the Hindu god behind my head here, Lord Shiva, many would say that he looks eerily like an alien. I mean, a blue-armed guy, or a blue four-armed guy who, you know, sits on a lotus that like revolves around him as he's sitting there.
Yep.
This is very UFO-y language if you want it to be. It's really easy to see.
Yeah.
And then in the cosmology, there's like all these different heavens and all these different realms where the different gods live and all this kind of shit. So it's super easy to see. If you
are they dimensions? Is it all alternative dimensions? Are they just literally phase shifted into a different reality and they're still here? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
And then you get into like ultra dimensionals and all that
Yep.
kind of shit. Like
now there's your Gaia stuff. I really recommend you start watching Gaia.
I'm sure you've heard the things about like the creatures that are the predator, where the person sees like the air moving and shit, but like it just looks like a cloaking device.
I would shit myself. I would literally shit myself. Like, nope.
Yeah.
I'm good. Go back into hiding. Nope.
Has anybody here witnessed a UFO or USO?
I have. Just 4 or 2?
UFO stories.
1.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, I think maybe 2. Maybe 2. Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
I can go first. Okay, so the first one was witnessed by me and my dad and maybe a cousin. I don't know. Her eyesight's kind of bad. So I must have been, oh God, I don't even know. Between the ages of 4 and 7, young, a wee lass. And we were going to see my cousins and my grandma in New Jersey. So that just means all kinds of weird shit's already happening. And we went, for whatever reason, decided we wanted to sit outside in their driveway in like camp chairs. And my dad used to like to do this thing where he would point out all the constellations and things like that to me. And now I do that for other people. And they always do this really sweet thing where they're like, I look at the stars and every time I think about you and all the times that you showed me all the constellations, which is very sweet. But he was like pointing out like, oh, like that's Orion's belt and that's supposed to be this. And if it was this time of year, you would see that. And we're looking, and now I know there was supposed to be a blimp going by. For whatever reason, when they used to do that, they would like do promotions and then you would see a blimp and it would be like the Goodyear blimp or something. So we were trying to see that, and we're sitting out there and it's getting later and it's getting later. And for a wee lass, 10 o'clock is like late. And he's like, maybe you should probably be trying to go to bed. And I'm like, no, I want to sit outside and look at the stars and listen to the peepers. It's a beautiful night. Little 7-year-old me. And he's like, do you see that? And I see what? And this man's over here with binoculars. I don't know what he's trying to see, but he's just doing that. You see that? He's like, you see that red light? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, that's not a plane. and it's not a helicopter, and it's like in a weird spot in the sky. And I was like, but wait, that's not the only red light. And then there was another red light, and then another red light, and then another red light, and then another red light, all lined up. And it looked like it was just slowly turning. And then it just kind of went, and then it was gone. And we were like, what? Because like we were watching like helicopters and planes and stuff go by for like hours, and everybody knows what those look like. Like most airplanes have multiple lights and they flash at different intervals and things like that. But these were like very slow, like almost like the lights that you see on the towers on mountains. But there's no mountains. It's just sky, because she lived by the ocean. So like, and it's not like we were looking at a horizon line. We were looking up, directly up in the sky. So to see something that's sort of in a saucer shape of just the light, you could just see the lights. You couldn't see anything else because it was too far away and like too high up to see exactly what it was. But it was very unidentified. It was an object, and it was flying, and it flew away. So that was strange. And then another one, a similar situation. I like to take a lot of pictures of the moon because I have a camera that can do that. I like looking at all the things and seeing if I can get different color phases and things like that. So sometimes, like quite a few times over the last year, the moon was rising exceptionally late in my area. Like it'll be way too far off, like behind a mountain, for me to get any decent pictures. And I don't drive, so that's not happening. But when it comes up across the street above my neighbor's house. And again, we see planes and helicopters and shit all the time. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's weird, because I think it was around the time where like Venus and Mars and the moon were all going to be like in a triangle. And in the middle of the triangle, I could see like what I thought at first was another star, or possibly a planet, because those tend to be brighter in the sky. And I was like, no, that's not right, because they just said it was going to be 3. And then it would have like this weird bluish tint to it. And it kind of like, when a pupil dilates, how it goes like, it did that a few times and then just blinked out, and that was it.
That's
was
crazy.
Like, okay. And that's all I got. I have no other UFO encounters.
I have 3, believe it or not, spread out over a lifetime. And none of them were the same. They were all completely different experiences, which is even weirder to me. 2 had witnesses. All right, imagine yourselves. It's the 1980s, and you're wearing acid wash jeans with poofy hair, hanging out in the parking lot at the Stanton Lanes in Wilkes-Barre.
There with you, man.
Now, mind you, I was a good kid, and it wasn't just, I just am, because when I'm bad, I get caught. So I do bad stuff when I know I can get away with it, but this was not one of those nights. So I'm trying to drag Donna home because she's trying to talk to boys, and I know we're dead if we're not home in 20 minutes. So we're yelling at each other face to face in the Stanton Lanes parking lot. And all of a sudden she stops dead and sticks her hand like right past my face and goes, "What the hell is that?" And I turned around and I look up, and it looks like almost a water droplet, a giant water droplet just goes whoosh, right up into the sky. Gone. We both just start screaming and run home. And we never talked about it until we were like 35 years old. We never discussed it. We ran home like 2 idiots and never talked about it again. It was the craziest. You know that movie, The Abyss, when that water tendril comes up out of the water? And you guys never saw that? She knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
When I saw that movie, I was freaked out for a year. I literally was so scared because it looked like that. But it was a ball and just went up into the sky. So the second one, I was like a teenager, and we pulled up at the drive-in over in Hanticoke there in West Hanticoke by the river.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to be with like 30 people, but I just got there. And I looked at how beautiful, because I like geography. Like I love the stones and I just love to see those things. So I look across the river and I'm like, wow, that is like a sheer cliff and just slow as molasses. Hello. This thing comes floating over the side of the mountain and it literally looked like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Like one of those glowy things, right? Silently, slowly is just floating over all these people and no one else sees it. Not one other human being in that place. So I'm like, what is that? What is what? And so I just shut up and I was like, am I losing my mind? Like what's happening? So I just watched it float away. And I was like, okay, that's over. I'm literally coming from straight in front of my face back towards the exact same spot, like a triangulation. It goes right silently, right back over behind the mountain. And nobody saw it but me. I was the only person who witnessed that one. Now, fast forward to Jason's 14, so had to be like 40. All right. So maybe 10 years ago. We go to the fireworks. Now, mind you, he is 14 and he came with me to the fireworks. So I'm like the happiest mother in the universe because I'm assuming I only have so many years left with this kid. And we go to Mohegan Sun and we're on the side of the horse track. And it is the brightest place in the universe, as you all know. It's ridiculous up there. Well, when they used to do fireworks, they would turn off all the lights for like 10 minutes. So as soon as that happened, just like Jess, I was like, okay, hurry up, look up in the sky. Let's see if we could see satellites, right? So we both look straight up in the air. And as soon as we look up, we see this light open up and this little red dot, ironically, fly right into the space where the light came on and the light turns off. And I looked at him and he looked at me and I said, did you just see that? And he goes, yep. Can we go home now? We stayed for the fireworks, but we talked about it for like 2 months. It was like the weirdest thing I ever saw. Literally right above us in the sky, just something opened up and light came out and a little red dot flew into it and it closed. So none of those are relative to each other, but those are things that I have seen. The second one I think is like almost along the lines of, I think some people are tuned in to see these things, just like some people are psychic. And I think that if you're on that frequency, you can see them. But if you're kind of not in that state, you can't, because there's no way other people didn't see that thing. I mean, it was huge. It wasn't some little tiny circle in the sky. It was like as big as 4 monster trucks. It was huge.
I'll tell you guys some UFO stories. So I haven't been abducted to my knowledge. I don't care to speculate, but seeing a bunch of weird lights in the sky, all that kind of shit, nothing all that remarkable. We live very close to Avoca Airport. We see the planes go over all the time. And, you know, one of the classic things in all the alien shows is where the skeptic goes, oh, it's just the lights from a plane. But you kind of know what that looks like after a while. And every once in a great, great while, we'd be sitting out there. It'd be like me and my dad most of the time, sitting out there having a fire, just hanging out, doing whatever. And we'd just see a light that we just kind of thought was a star. And it would be hanging out like seemingly over the edge of the trees. We live on the edge of the woods, just kind of hanging out, you know, and we wouldn't think anything of it. We just think, oh, it's like a real bright star, whatever. It's the North Star or some shit like that. But we'd be sitting there and we would just see the star shoot straight up into the air and then be gone. And look at each other like, the fuck was that? Like, that's not supposed to happen. And that happened a couple times throughout my childhood, like, 3 to 5 times probably we saw that. He told me several other stories where that happened. And I remember one very distinctly because it was the afternoon. And it was a cloudy afternoon in the middle of summer. And as I was sitting there, I saw a plane fly over. And then a couple minutes later, there was just this big orange ball that was just drifting through the air very slowly. And I was a kid. I was like 10 or 11, so I was freaking the fuck out. Like, I'm seeing this thing, like, is it coming for me? Does it notice me? So I'm closing the curtains in the house, but of course, like, peeking through them, you know. And I'm watching it, and it just flies over very slowly. And then a couple minutes later, there's 2 other ones. And then that was it. you know, a couple minutes later, there was no trace of any of it ever happening.
What
And
direction were they flying? Like, were they flying towards Wilkes-Barre, towards Scranton, towards the Poconos?
they're going toward the airport.
Wow.
Pretty standard direction. that
Wow.
the other plane goes on that route. So I don't know.
Hmm.
Say the only other things I have here in terms of stories or some of the things that my dad told me that he had seen or things that he was told, because he was in the Navy briefly for a few years there. You know, you do your standard duty and then you get out type deal in the 70s. So he said he never ever really went into like the full of what he's seen, but he would mention like if he did see something, he would bring it up to a superior and they'd be like, we don't tell anybody else what you saw. Like if you see anything else, like you report directly to me, like you don't say anything. If you see something, say something, but only to me. So he had said that he's seen stuff pretty weird over the, like being in the middle of the ocean at the time in the 70s, where it's like, okay, especially knowing what technology that they had at the time, whether or not there were more advanced things that weren't disclosed is another story. But he said he's seen really weird lights in the sky. He knew what like searchlights on a helicopter and things like that would look like. He said he's seen that, like where it'll just be a beam of light going down, but you wouldn't see any aircraft because it would be like cloudy or something. It would be like they were behind a cloud and you would just see the light just go down and be there for a few minutes and then just come back up, and then that was it. He said he saw those a couple of times. He's seen undisclosed clusters of lights that weren't any currently known, like that would be on any type of aircraft type of deal. For us at the time or any of the other countries, it's like no aircraft would have that combination of lights flashing in that pattern in any type of like, I don't know, SOS scenario or something like that. So he said he's seen that, and quite a few of the other guys had come and said like, oh, we heard that you saw this, like this is what I saw. And they said some of the same things that Angela was talking about earlier, that they have seen lights in the water that would not be like submarines or anything. It's just something like too far down below the surface to really discern what it could be. Almost kind of like the what is it, the anglerfish type of deal, where it's like you see the light and you want to go in and see what it is, and they're like, no, you don't do that. You don't see any, you see nothing, mind your business. Because that's what it was most of the time, is if you see something, you go, that's weird, and then just move on with whatever your duties are supposed to be, and then just bring it up to somebody later like, hey, as long as it didn't have anything to do with, oh God, what year would it have been? What year was the Vietnam War?
Oh, it was like in the late 60s. It ended in 1972 or 73, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
so he was at the tail end of that then. So he was the Navy guy that didn't really see a whole lot of action. He was kind of like the we're
Thank
here
God.
if you need us boat, which a lot of people in the military are like, you didn't actually see any action. Like, yeah, but we're here if you needed us, and you'd be screwed if we weren't, type of deal. But a lot of they said the same thing. Like you had said earlier, some of the guys in Vietnam had said they done seen some shit. He was told that they had for real seen some shit, and that those people were taken aside, debriefed, and then when you would go to ask them about it, they'd be like, what are you talking about? I know that. Lights coming out of the ocean? What do you mean? I don't know. And then they would never be seen or heard from ever again. Like they just magically disappeared, type of like Men in Black type of conspiracy theories, that type of deal.
You got to ask your grandfather if you ever heard about those undercontinental waterways, like they go all the way across the entire US. If he's more than 25 years out and he heard of it. I think they found those though later, but he might know, he might have heard of it. They're like ancient cave systems.
I know my dad had brought it up a couple of times because my dad had passed away. But for anybody who doesn't know, my parents were in their 40s when they had me, so they're in their grandparents' age now. So, but yeah, he had talked about a lot of that stuff. He was super into like ancient aliens. He would always, like, he said if he was going to cosplay at a convention as anybody, he would be that Sukalos guy that constantly like this. His hair is like nuts. He would be that guy. But yeah, no, it's one of those things where him and I were of the same mindset that if we had ever come into any type of political power, that would be like the number one thing we would ask about. I'd be like, I don't give a shit what's going on in this country. Is Area 51 real? Do you have the aliens? Give me the book. I want to see a map. Like, what other countries have? I want to know right now.
All right. Have any of you heard a theory that aliens are actually cloned or programmed life forms because it's too far to travel? So they think they're actually like either cloned humans or they are programmed life forms, like they don't have to eat. That's why the Greys look like they have no emotions, that they're literally being driven by creatures from like outside of our universe, but they fly all over the place and they like collect specimens like she was talking about before. You should Google that. You want to go down a trippy road.
I've never heard that, Ange. I've never heard that.
And we can add that to the list
Yeah.
of life forms, because I think
programmed life forms. It's insane.
So then my next question is, all right, so we'll engage some willing suspension of disbelief and say that aliens do exist.
Coco.
If they've got the technology to show up,
Mhm.
to just, blip people up, do experiments, blip them back down, or just show up and observe or take samples of other things, whatever they're doing, if they have the technology to do that and blip out and we can't find them and we can't catch them, then I kind of tend to believe that if they wanted to hurt us, they absolutely would have by now.
I agree 100%.
So what are they doing then? If they're here, let's just say they're here for the sake of the discussion. They're here.
Okay.
What are they doing here? What is the function of the behavior?
What if they're us? What if they're literally us from the future? Okay, so some people believe that
brain just exploded.
Yeah. What if they're us from the future coming back to get things from the past that they killed off and they want to repopulate the earth? There's a theory for you. But when you talk about time, right? A string theorist or some physicists will tell you that all time is happening at the same time. There is no yesterday or tomorrow. Right. If you imagine there's a fence in front of you with a hole in it, and behind that fence there's a snake and it's slithering by, but all you see is the part that's going through the hole. That's what a human life is. So that whole snake is there, but you're just there where the hole is looking in. So if you figure out how to move that snake forward or backwards, it's all happening now. So they believe that you can just fold space and go back in time and like nothing. If you can create the right field, the right gravitational field, you can literally reverse time. But would you end up in the same place? No, because our whole entire galaxy and universe spin at how fast. You'd really have to know what you were doing. But a lot of people believe that it might be us from the future studying our past.
That's interesting.
That's a little crazy.
Crazy.
I got other ones. What if they're from inner Earth and they're just our predecessors, like I said before?
I do think like the inner Earth stuff is very interesting because you do hear a lot of different things about the different types of cave systems and all that stuff, or like a lost world, if you will, of things that could possibly be out there that we just haven't found yet. And of course, like the media has 1,000,001 TV shows and movies about those types of things. I mean, God, for all we know, we can go down into the earth, into a giant cave and find King Kong, let alone an alien.
Woohoo!
Or species or dinosaurs or things like that. But as to why, I don't think any show, book, anything that I've ever read has explicitly given an answer or a theory or any type of thought as to why an alien life form would want to be here.
I will digress because I have heard theories of why they're here. You ready?
Well, yeah, but they
no
can never
good
really
ones.
Yeah, they can never really give you, like, obviously they can't give you a definite answer, but most of the like theories and things are just for science.
I heard about like I've heard stuff about like alien agreements with the government or something, like you can like a peace agreement or something. Like I know 1952 there was a UFO sighting over the White House. Did you ever hear about that?
Yeah.
And it made like actually it made news and everything. But like and there's also on the History Channel there was like all like the US president, like all these different like secretive, how much did like certain presidents know. So I wonder if it was just like an agreement that certain leaders or whatnot made, okay, you don't hurt us and we'll let and like I don't know, like I've heard something in regards to like basically like we'll let you use some of us as lab rats, and
You
yeah,
technology and everyone
like
in the dark,
like
and it's
to
all cool.
exchange for things, like exchanging things between the two, like for peace.
If you
But
go back to that show that I was talking about, Ancient or Cosmic Disclosure, right? What they're saying is we are so dangerous with the things that we have created, like bombs, and they've seen us destroying our planet, that some of the aliens actually want to help us by giving us the things that we need so we stop destroying the earth, because if we continue on a violent path, we're actually a threat to the universe because we're that powerful. Like we're capable of things that a lot of other species are not, just because we have emotions and passion and we have this creativity that a lot of other species lack.
I don't see why they would care so much about that if there's so many other planets out there.
Right?
I think we're kind of on a good path as far as like the look at what man has been capable of so far. When is it that we finally tap into that last minute, you know, technology, and all of a sudden, hey, we can do space jumps and like all of your things. Like we're already at the point that we are getting closer and closer to being able to inhabit other planets. What stops us from going to other universes and stuff like that? And I feel like a lot of the surveillance, because I'm going to call it surveillance, because they haven't really done much to us, if unless you want to go into the whole abductions and whatnot. But I think it's surveillance in the sense of we human race can either be something that we can all benefit from because the fact that we're intellectual enough to be able to continue to build up our empire or our race from being dumber than a bag of bricks to, oh my god, look at some of the stuff we create. Like I can't even believe how we created vinyl records. I was watching a video on that earlier. Like it's insane. But we're viewed of we as a species are one of two things. We can either be something that is beneficial and a must to the continuation of life, whether it be just on Earth or in other places, or we're a plague, we're a virus, we're what COVID is, we're something that we're going to continue to spread and spread and spread. And if you don't start to kind of intervene at this point, what stops us from going all the way? Because we could essentially do to other planets that we do to our own. Who knows? I mean, I feel like that also the idea what these things are. I just think of this cheesy movie of called Annihilation, and I've brought this movie up before because it mentally screwed me up. But essentially, it was like this organic type force field was dropped on the planet, and everything inside this force field, its genetic code was able to mutate with its surroundings, and nothing, the limits of genetic code was endless. So you could be walking through it as a human being and all of a sudden you start turning into that tree right there, and the bear starts turning into this, and like everything starts to just like intermix. And essentially what the whole ending, I guess, if you can really call it an ending, because it took me about an hour of reading reviews on understanding the ending, but it was like this chrome type substance at the core, because of course this biologist, she had to know what was going on because this force field was growing, so they were trying to stop it. And she finally gets to the center, and it turns out that it's just this chrome looking crude representation of an outline of a human, and it slowly starts mimicking her appearance. And then before you know it, at the end of the movie, it becomes her, but it doesn't only become her, it can it can duplicate itself. And then everything that was inside that force field other than themselves, because they were able to bond with human DNA, everything else died, of course, and the force field went away, and they blended in with our population with their pretty little violet type eyes that was able to come like in and out of viewpoint or whatever. But like, and I think this is something that you could also tie into the whole unsolved mysteries as far as what's dark matter. And there's so many things, like who knows, we could even link aliens to the spiritual world with it being different dimensions. And there's just so many answers out there, and I'm sure we could spend hours upon hours debating topics. But obviously with everything that we talk about here, it all comes down to the unknown. What are the limits of the human mind? Because I don't think we'll ever have all of the answers. But